I want to create an ASP.NET Web API, which uses Entity Framework, and I want GitHub Copilot to help me out. Let's see how we can do this. I've already got the project set up, and I'm ready to start adding in some code. The first thing that I need is to describe all of my models here that are going to be used for my application. Now, this is typically going to be relatively mundane boilerplate code, but fortunately, GitHub Copilot is going to help streamline this for me because I'll just be able to say, hey, this is what I want, and let GitHub Copilot start making suggestions for me. I do need to add in a couple of real quick options. I need to pull in the Entity Framework namespace using Microsoft.Entity Framework Core, and then set up my namespace of .NET Copilot.data. Cool. You're going to notice GitHub Copilot is ready to go. That gray italicized text that we see there, that is GitHub Copilot already making suggestions. Let me add in a comment and help point GitHub Copilot in the direction that I want it to go. I'm going to start by creating a speaker class. I want this API to be used for controlling conferences. So I want to have speakers and I also want to have talks. So let's set up that speaker first. So I will say public class, let's do it this way instead. Let's add in a comment. So create a speaker class with ID, name, and bio. And just like that gray italicized text, that's GitHub Copilot suggestion. Let me accept that. And there it is. You are going to notice a couple of yellow squigglies here. What this is telling me is that name and bio could be null, and that could cause an error later on. It's valid code, but it's going to be a warning once it's compiled. I can get around that in C# by putting a question mark at the end. That's effectively a flag going, hey, I know that this could be null, but it's not going to be. I've got that added in, and now I'm ready to turn my attention to creating a talk. So let's say create a talk class with a speaker, an ID, a title, and a description. Like that. Cool. And one more time, GitHub Copilot is going to make a suggestion. You'll notice that it's got my class talk, my ID, my title, my description, my speaker, and you'll also notice that it included those question marks. It did that because it's looking at the context that I have, it sees that I use that, and it's now adding in that code automatically for me. Now, the last thing that I need to make sure that I add in is an ID that references back to the speaker. So let's just get that added in. Add foreign key. And I've now got that. But just because I've got my talk pointing at my speaker, I want to make sure that I can go the other way as well. Let's go ahead and update our speaker to point at talks. And you'll notice that when I go up to my speaker, GitHub Copilot is already making suggestions. So it's not just reading my comments, but it's also looking at my code and making suggestions on what it sees. So it knows that I've got my talk pointing at my speaker. I need my speaker to point back to my talks, and it did that for me. So I actually didn't have to prompt it. I just had to go up, give it a little space, and GitHub Copilot made that suggestion for me. Let's create the context here. So this context is now going to act as the go-between between my data and the database, or my application in the database. So we'll accept the comment that GitHub Copilot suggested, and then we'll accept the suggestion that it's making right here. Now, we can also actually look through the multiple suggestions that it's giving me. So I can kind of look and choose and decide which one it is that I want to start with. And I'll go with the first one that it gave me here. Application DB context works just fine as the name. Let me hit tab to accept it. I am going to need to add in those little question marks again just to get around the compiler warning. Not a big deal there. We'll add that in. And now I've got my context created. But the last big thing that I need here is I need to start defining the relationships for this context and maybe even add in some validation. So let's do that. All of this is done off of the onModel creating method. So I just need to override that. So let's put in a comment here and let's say override the onModel creating. So it actually filled out the rest of that for me. And now I can accept what it gives me here. And what we're going to notice is that it has the code to set the primary key for my speaker, for my talk, and creating the relationship back and forth between my speaker and my talk. Let's add in a little more validation here. Let's say that I want to ensure that our name, for example, is required and no more than 50 characters, and that our bio is also required and also no more than, let's say, 200 characters. Make all fields on speaker required, limit the length of the name field to 100 characters, let's say 50, and then limit the length of the bio to 500, let's say 200 instead. And so you'll notice that GitHub Copilot is seeing what it is that I'm doing and making suggestions for me. With all of that, let's go ahead and accept the next couple of lines that it's going to generate. And I've now got all of that set up. So my name is required, has my max length. My bio is required, has my max length. And it's all ready to move on to fields. So it saw what I did before, said, I like that. Let's keep doing that. Okay, it didn't actually do that. I'm kind of having a little fun there. But it saw what I did up above and said, here's what I think you want to do next. So let's see what it starts making suggestions. So title, 50 characters, description, 200 characters, and it will generate all of that for me. So just like that, I now have this model, this context all created. Fantastic. So that's the first thing that I need to do. The next thing that I need to do is go register all of that. So let me go into my program and register that. And I'm going to need to pull in a couple of namespaces here. I'm going to need the entity framework core, and then I'm also going to need that model's namespace. So using my .NET Copilot or data namespace, that was what I called it. Perfect. And right down below controllers, let's go ahead and register the context using the in-memory database. And so it's set that up for me. So it's got the context, it's got my in-memory database, and it's given it a name of .NET Copilot. That works just fine for me. Excellent. Last but not least is to create the controller. So let me open up my Explorer, create a controller, and let's just create a speaker controller. So I'm going to say speaker controller.cs and hit enter. And now I'm ready to create my controller here. Once again, I need a couple of namespaces. So let's say using Microsoft ASP.NET Core MVC. Let's pull in the entity framework core. GitHub Copilot made that suggestion. Cool. And then it's also suggesting my data. Fantastic. It's got my namespace set up. And now it's going to start creating my controller. So it's got the first attribute there to mark it as an API controller. It's got the next one to flag the route. And then it's got the entirety of my controller right down below here. That's pretty cool. It generated the entire controller for me. I didn't have to write any code for this. Now, this is still my code. Even though it was generated by GitHub Copilot, it's still my code. So I need to make sure that everything is behaving the way that I expect it. So I am noticing that I'm getting a little bit of a compiler warning here on speakers. And the reason for that is because there's a possibility that it could be null. I know that's not the case, so I'm going to add in the appropriate C# syntax for that, which is putting in a bang. And then I'm going to go back through and everything else looks pretty good to me. Excellent. Well, let's test it. So I'm going to start the debugger, which will actually launch the website, and it's got Swagger built in. So I'll be able to play around with a little interface. Okay. And now I can see there's my speaker with all of the create, retrieve, update, all of the CRUD operations. So let's create a brand new speaker just to show that this works. So I'm going to update my little body here. So let's set the ID to 1. Let's set the name to Christopher. Let's set the bio to, he was born at a young age, which I was. And let's get rid of the list of talks. I'm not going to worry about talks here. And let's execute that. And if I scroll down, I can see the full response body. All of that looks good. And now let's scroll back up to the top here. Let's do a get on this. So let's try that out, execute. And we can see that response body that was sent back down to us. And so what we saw was how GitHub Copilot can streamline this process for us. That I started off by creating my models by mostly just describing what it is that I needed and letting GitHub Copilot make the appropriate suggestions. I registered everything inside of my website, inside my program. And then finally, I've got the speaker controller of which GitHub Copilot basically suggested and wrote the entire thing. I was able to review this code, make sure that it behaved the way that I expected, accept it, and then move on from there. So GitHub Copilot can help me manage away some of the more tedious aspects to programming and allow me to stay in the zone and focus in on bigger tasks.